We have often told our students to keep their eyes on their own paper, but what about us as teachers? Do we really keep our eyes on our own paper, or are we constantly comparing ourselves to other teachers in the profession and feeling like we're not good enough? If you have ever felt like this, keep watching. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Dear Teachers, a weekly show designed to promote teacher self-care and a positive work-life balance in the profession. I'm your host, Sarah. In today's episode, we'll address why teachers are comparing themselves in the first place and some of the types of comparison that we see, as well as strategies we can use to help overcome these feelings of comparison or inadequacy in the classroom. First up, we have to ask the question, why are we comparing ourselves in the first place? And I think the root issue is not necessarily just a teacher-related issue. I think in general in society, we compare ourselves in a lot of different ways. We compare the way we look. We compare how much money we have. We compare our relationship status or our families. We compare our happiness or how much good we think we're doing. And it can be pretty exhausting no matter what situation. Even our students are likely comparing themselves based upon how smart they think they are, maybe who's a better athlete or better at certain activities. This can be an issue across so many boards. But what types of teacher comparisons happening? It might be the way certain teachers are teaching something. Maybe they're using methods that seem a lot more advanced or interactive than what you're using, and you're feeling bad about that. Maybe their classroom space makes you really jealous of your own classroom space, or you feel like your classroom doesn't measure up when you see all of these beautiful examples of classrooms out there. Or you might feel like they have really great ways of interacting with the kids, that they have a better relationship with their students, or they just have a magical way of dealing with some of those student behaviors that just makes you so frustrated because maybe that's one of your least favorite parts about the job, or you really struggle with certain behavior dynamics. We might even feel like one teacher always has it together or is always just rainbows and sunshine and everything seems to be going great. And we know in our own life we don't feel that way, or we don't feel that same passion for the job that maybe it looks like that person has. And these are all very common situations that we might experience when we're making comparisons. And I think it's important not just to acknowledge that we experience these comparisons, but we also have to have some insight into where they come from. Why do we start to form these comparisons in the first place? And I think there's a couple different types of comparisons that often get made, but I really want to kind of take an informed look at all of these categories. The first of which we might experience has to do with age or experience. Whether you are a newer teacher or a veteran teacher, as well as if you're a younger teacher versus a teacher who is a little bit older. I think there are pros and cons with any of these roles, and it could be very likely that you are experiencing feeling inadequate because of one of these factors. From the new teacher or young teacher perspective, you might feel like you are drowning in keeping up with the responsibilities. You might not have developed your ideal teaching style yet, so you might be struggling with how to teach or just to get a handle on aspects of the job. Likewise, you also might feel like you don't command the same authority in your classroom as an older teacher. And again, none of these are true across the board, but these are just common feelings you might be having. On the other hand, someone who is more of a veteran teacher might feel like they are tired of the way they've been doing it, or they want to upgrade or update their lessons to be able to be more reflective of some of the modern issues within education or even access to technology, and they might feel a little jealous of the newer teachers or the younger teachers who it seems second nature for them to be having some of these new ideas or incorporating this technology. You also might feel like it's tougher to relate to the students because there's a larger age gap. So I think it really depends, but I know personally I have definitely made comparisons about myself, feeling not as good about my teaching, but really having to remember that over time comes experience, and I would get that experience eventually. So I just had to not focus on the comparison factor there. Another type of comparison that can happen is if we are comparing ourselves to the past teachers that a group of students had, or even other teachers they have maybe at the same time, such as in a middle school environment where your students have the same group of teachers as part of the team. This can be really difficult when you're hearing students reminisce about past years or talking with excitement about how much they enjoyed a teacher's class, and it might make us feel a little bit inadequate about ourselves, like, well, why aren't they talking about my class? Or why don't they feel that same way about my class? It can be especially challenging at the secondary level because they might also have those teachers at the same time that they're having your class. And sometimes they might share factors that they love about another teacher's class, or you might overhear them say things that are more hurtful about your class. I know one thing that was a little bit challenging for me to hear from some students a couple years ago was that the students were acting way worse in terms of behavior in my class than in the other teachers on my team. And that was painful to hear, and I definitely was upset about that. I didn't want that to be the case. I wanted to have good classroom management. And so I did fortunately turn that around and had a really positive experience, but that can be difficult. It can also be unfortunate if they seemed to have a teacher before who was, the shining example of what you felt like a perfect teacher could be, and you don't feel like you measure up. How do you combat that situation? It can be challenging, but I think first reflecting the issue and reflecting on the situation is very helpful. Before I get into solutions, one other type of teacher comparison that happens a lot and might even be the most common in today's world has to do with comparisons on social media. We likely find there's a lot of amazing ideas and inspiration online that we can use to inspire our own teaching, but unfortunately, this is where a lot of our feelings of inadequacy develop. We see these beautiful examples of picture-perfect classrooms and lesson plans that are above and beyond what we normally do in our own class. And unfortunately, we often don't see the balance or the trade-off from these types of things. It also is important for us to remember that in many of these situations, whether they're different websites or Instagram accounts, wherever it is, many of these different people who are creating this amazing content, there might be a business side to that where they're motivated to show you the best of the best because it's part of their livelihood. And there's nothing wrong with that. I myself sell lesson plans and those kind of activities on Teachers Pay Teachers. But I think it's also important for us to recognize the balance there, that some of these images that we're seeing are exaggerated to be extra perfect, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the realness of that teacher or their classroom. In teaching, there are going to be good days and bad days, lesson plans that go amazing and lesson plans that are terrible and just a big train wreck, and that's okay. It's all part of the learning process. But it definitely helps be mindful of this when we are consuming education-related social media. So let's say you're struggling with teacher comparison and don't feel like you're good enough of a teacher. How do we overcome this? I've identified 3 key steps to make this happen. The first step is to remember that you are on your own journey. So much of our own journey and experience is personal that our teaching wouldn't look the same as anyone else. We have different past schooling experiences, different personalities, different priorities and values within education that we like to incorporate more of, different family dynamics, different groups of students, different school climates, and different coworkers and administration. There is so much that's different. We're working with different resources, and that in itself, if we really acknowledge all of the different things that make up who you are as a teacher, we start to realize more that we can't compare with these other teachers because we don't really know the full story, and we have to just really celebrate and acknowledge our own journey. Also, it's important because different teaching styles and different teachers appeal to different students. I know as a student I had several favorite teachers, and they weren't necessarily the favorite teachers of everyone. We mean something more to certain students than their other teachers, as well as their other teachers might mean something more than we do to them, and that's okay. Students aren't going to love being in every teacher's class, or they aren't going to have all the same favorite teacher. That's the beauty of it. Just like we have favorite people that we've worked with and some people we don't enjoy working with as much, it's important to identify that we all are looking for something different and we all offer something different. And if you can focus on that rather than trying to be liked or be impactful to all of your students, I think it's a victory if there are several students who find your class really meaningful. And if we can focus on celebrating that rather than being sad that we're not able to maybe have that same connection with everyone or not be, the most popular person on the team of teachers or whatever the case is, that's okay. And half the time you're not even going to know that you're making an impact. And that can be really tough, but if we can just acknowledge that we are impactful to different students, then that matters. It's also really important to celebrate your own abilities. In society, why is it that we don't always celebrate our accomplishments or our victories? We might be quick to celebrate the accomplishments of others, but what about yourself? When was the last time you gave yourself proper acknowledgement of a job well done? We sometimes forget to do this. So let's start to shift that a little bit and be more appreciative of what you are doing that is going great. I would recommend keeping track of these somewhere because we might experience those moments of joy during the day, but not remember them in the long term. I like to create something called a smile file. Now, I do have to give credit where credit is due. One of my elementary teachers actually introduced me to the smile file concept. I don't remember exactly what time of year it was, but we all wrote notes to all the other students in the class, just positive little kind messages, and you would deposit those notes in everyone's smile file, which was just a folder that was taped to their desk. And the idea was those notes were there for you whenever you needed them, and they were really nice things. So let's shift that a little bit and have that be something for teachers. Maybe this is a desk drawer. Maybe it's a folder in your email. Maybe it's even a journal where you write down one thing you're grateful for from each day of teaching. Something like that you can refer back to and feel really good about is important. I know I had a desk drawer dedicated to this, where I kept notes from students or cards from other teachers that were meaningful. And if I needed a pick-me-up, even if it was in the middle of the day, I knew I could go right there and take a look at those, and it would give me those warm and fuzzy feelings. Let's celebrate these wins more. If we're able to be more grateful of our experience and really acknowledge that, you know what, even if you're not as perfect as these other teachers seem, you're still doing a darn good job. And I think that's something worth celebrating. Along the same topic, there's also a question I have used for individuals who are struggling with comparison. And that question is, if you could honestly trade places with that person and literally be that person, would you? And obviously you can't actually do this. 100% of the time when I've asked someone that question, they said, I wouldn't want to trade my life. I'm really happy with these aspects of my life, or I really love my family dynamic. Whatever it is, people likely would not want to give that up. So if we remember, I'm really happy with what I've got. I don't need to be that person. I don't want to trade what I have to have that. Then it really grounds us. Lastly, I think it's really important to identify whatever triggers us to feel this inadequacy or like we're not good enough. And if we can identify what that is, to remove that negative stimulus from our lives. Maybe it means limiting the type of content you're consuming. Maybe it means unfollowing certain accounts if you feel like it's too much. Maybe it means spending a little bit less time in conversation with certain people who make you not feel as good about yourself. Life is short. Let's make sure the time we're spending either in person or online, let's make sure that time is meaningful and aligns to what we're trying to achieve. If you are noticing repeated triggers that are making you unhappy or upset in any way, then I don't think those are something that you need to be consuming or that you need to be interacting with. Being more mindful of this can also help keep you in really positive, uplifting spirits. And I think it can be important to promote that positivity by being more positive yourself. Fewer judgmental conversations or criticisms of others will really help to promote positivity. And if we focus more on celebrating each other than trying to bring someone down, that can also just lead to more positive feelings overall. Thank you so much for watching episode 1 of Dear Teachers. These episodes are every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. So we'll see you next week for our next episode. We'll talk soon. Bye.